The Denver Broncos running back room has struggled over the last couple of years, but we'll tell you why Harvey and Audric Estime may very well be the solution to the Broncos' problems in that department. All on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Broncos Country. What's happening? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you know it is your team every day. Thank you so much to the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Thanks for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day, however you choose to do so. Now, if you're not yet an everydayer, it's super simple to become one. All you have to do is hit that subscribe or that follow button down below, and you'll never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team every single day, all year long. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports.
And I'm Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantly orange.com.
And here's what you can expect on today's episode of the show, Broncos Country, as we continue our player profile series on the Denver Broncos draft picks. We did one on Javonte Williams yesterday. Today's focus is on Harvey and why he could lead the Broncos offense in a lot of different categories this upcoming season. We'll look at his fit within the system, but more importantly, we'll go over some of his strengths, like his vision, his speed, and his explosiveness, and then we'll also go into some of his weaknesses as well. Fumbles over the last couple of years, is that a concern that Broncos fans should carry over into the regular season? We'll highlight that much more in today's episode of the show, which is brought to you by our friends, Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more today. Sayre, let's go into this as we continue our profile series here on Harvey. Now, the Broncos' second-round pick in the 2025 NFL draft here. I feel like when we get into these player profile series, a lot of people in Broncos Country want to know, what is the projection here for the depth chart? How might that work out? I would say the running back position right now might be the trickiest one to try to put together when we talk about the full picture of this room. But where do you estimate that Harvey's going to land?
No pun intended there, right, Cody? We got, don't underestimate this running back room, because Audric Estime, he's not to be underestimated. Maybe next time we will estimate him. No, I think that he's going to fit in wherever the Broncos feel like, hey, this guy's going to get the most touches in the offense. Last year, Javonte Williams had 197 total touches, Jaleel McLaughlin 137. So I think when you look at that breakdown from last year, it's probably not going to be the exact same, right? Because we hope and expect the Broncos to be better at running the football this year, and therefore the backs should probably get more touches. However, I think that you're going to see Harvey leading the way in terms of overall touches within the offense. The Broncos and general manager George Paton specifically have talked about how they feel like Harvey has this untapped potential as a receiver, and they obviously believe that he can be a difference maker for an offense that the offensive line has been graded exceptionally high when it comes to run blocking the last couple of years. And I think the Broncos are believing that it's the running backs that have been the problem. And it's been 2 years of sample, right? Javonte over the last 2 years has really struggled. And so the Broncos move on from him this offseason. You get Harvey in the building. I feel like he's going to be that guy that leads this team in overall touches, regardless of where he lands on the depth chart.
I'm very curious as well to see how Sean maneuvers the running back rotation this year, right? I think maybe we can give an early projection here. Do you think they carry 3 or 4 running backs on their 53-man roster? I'm on the premise of saying I think they carry 3. But then again, if they like Blake Watson, I mean, remember, they brought Blake Watson up to the 53 last year because some other teams were poking around trying to prime away off the practice squad. I'm curious to see how this is going to formulate. But my thought here is, like, from you, like, do you see there being 3 or 4 here on the 53?
I think there's going to be 3 plus a fullback, right? And then I like Blake Watson to take that 3rd spot because, look, Jaleel McLaughlin has not been discussed when it comes to this joker position offensively, and neither has Sayre Bedinger. I think you and I both agree that if there's any holdover from last year's roster that had those joker qualities, it was probably Blake Watson, and I can't help but feel the Broncos are excited about him.
Well, one thing I want to highlight here, and obviously Sean Payton told us this at the end of the year press conference, is that he doesn't necessarily believe in the bell cow in today's game, right? Because obviously you have 17 regular season games soon to be in the next, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years, maybe 18 regular season games. And if you get into the postseason, that's added games in that standpoint there. And I think with the wear and tear, like Sean is one guy who uses, a variety of different services. He tracks players' usage and wear and tear throughout the course of a practice, throughout the course of the entire week. Like, he's a big believer in that because he doesn't want to put too many miles on these guys' bodies in terms of practice. But also when you factor in games, the running back position, we all know, it absorbs the most content across the entire NFL. And it's one of those ones where it is boom or bust. When you get to the outside, can you make certain plays happen while trying to avoid being hit by linebackers and by safety? So I think that's something certainly to highlight here. But you mentioned like Javonte's touches, Jalil's touches, Audric's touches last year. I feel like a lot of the struggles at running backs here was because there was no continuity in an established rotation at running back, right? So for me, I think if we have to predict it right now, roster locks at this position, I think Audric Estime is a roster lock, and I think RJ Harvey is a roster lock, and I think you're going to have 3 or 4 other guys battling for that last spot there, and I think that's going to be exciting. I think it's going to raise the floor of that room here. But you mentioned something about the grading of the offensive line. The Broncos had the offensive line graded as their highest graded unit internally by the team. That's something that George Payton said. The defensive line was second. And I think it goes to those issues that we saw. Like when you go back and watch film, how many times did we see a hole open up or Javonte not see it, not hit the hole, or not trust to have patience in that? I look at RJ Harvey's college tape, and literally there's times where he's supposed to hit in the A gap and that hole closes because it's not blocked well. He didn't have a great offensive line at UCF. But his vision and patience allowed him to make plays. And that's something that this Broncos offense has not had at the running back position in quite some time. And the hope is that RJ Harvey can come in and lead this for this team.
Yeah, and you can't help but wonder, with the concerted effort to get him the ball, who stands to kind of not benefit from that, right? I mean, that's the other backs on this roster, like Jalil McLaughlin last year getting 137 touches, like we mentioned. It's crazy because his snap count and touches overall went up pretty significantly from his rookie year in 2023, when he was kind of the new, the shiny undrafted free agent, the sleeper, the guy who's cracking the roster after a great preseason. His usage goes up and his yards per touch goes way, way down. He only finished with 2 additional yards from scrimmage last season compared to his rookie year, Cody. 572 last year, 570 the year prior. And again, even with the increase in overall touches, same number of touchdowns. And so I'm not trying to bag on Jalil McLaughlin or anything like that, but I do think that it's important for us to talk about there's going to be a ripple effect of adding even just one back to this roster. And that's one of the things I'm most shocked about, is that Broncos add RJ Harvey. They haven't added anybody else. And even if they add, Captain America, Chris Evans, it doesn't matter who they end up adding to the roster. This is substantial. They won't make any more substantial move barring an unexpected trade. This is the guy, and everything that they're doing tells us what we can expect about this guy's role as a rookie.
And I think a lot of the mystery here that we're all trying to solve is this guy going to come in and he's going to get, the starting reps? You mentioned overall volume of snaps. I think where RJ has an advantage here over Audric is that I imagine that RJ is probably going to be more of a weapon as a pass catcher. Though I would say Audric Estime might be a little underrated in that category. Remember, there was this one play, I can't remember, it was against the Falcons. I think this was kind of in garbage time where there's a screen play. I think Bo Nix dumps it off to Audric out in the flat. He hurdles a defender. It gets called back because a defender for the Falcons was holding on to Bo Nix a little too long, and Garrett Bowles got an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, unnecessary roughness, 15 yards. I still think that, man, the smash and dash combination that could be on display here for the Broncos, I think, is a very distinct possibility. When you look at this running back room with these 2 guys here, I know the Broncos, they still believe a lot in Audric Estime. And I think that's what we're going to see, the emphasis early on in training camp. Don't be surprised if you come out and Audric's getting the first reps with the first team offense, and you're seeing RJ Harvey mixing with the second and third team, maybe here and there the first team. But the same exact thing happened with Bo Nix last season when the Broncos were going through their quarterback competition. There will be a running back competition. It's going to be extensive, and RJ Harvey's going to have an opportunity to prove himself very early on here for the Broncos. But Broncos Country, want to know your thoughts here on whether or not the RJ Harvey will lead the Broncos in overall touches this upcoming season. Make sure you share your thoughts with us here on today's episode of the show. But we're not done yet, Broncos Country. We still got a lot to break down in our player profile series. We're going to take a look at some of the noted strengths here of RJ Harvey, including his contact balance, his explosiveness, and his vision, which could help the Broncos offense take a step forward in the run department. We'll break that down much more on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? I know, right? Crazy. You can turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices, and no console is required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to go. And you can dive into hundreds of premium titles, including my favorites from EA Sports College Football 25 and Jedi Survivor, just as easily as you stream your favorite shows.
Well, look, if you ever wanted to try playing out certain Xbox games, but you don't want to make the big time investment in going out there and spending on a console, well, this is perfect because the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K allows you to try those titles without ever having to buy a console. You want to play EA Sports College Football 25? Well, you can play as Javonte Williams and the Texas Longhorns, or RJ Harvey at UCF, and you can have your own hands-on experience with seeing what these guys are going to bring to the table to the Denver Broncos in 2025.
So head on to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller are required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K second generation, Fire TV Stick 4K Max first and second generation, and Fire TV Cube third generation. Everything the Denver Broncos lacked at the running back position last year, RJ Harvey has in the strengths column. So Denver Broncos country, you are getting ready to have an absolute game changer added to this team. But what specifically does he have that the Broncos lacked last year that he's going to be able to potentially contend for Offensive Rookie of the Year? I'm going to throw it out there right now, Cody. I think RJ Harvey is going to be in the discussion this coming season. But before we go any further, Broncos country, shout out to all of you that make us your first listen of the day every single day here at Locked On Broncos. We appreciate you so much, especially you everydayers that we see you in the comments all the time. And if you're not already, go ahead, hit subscribe and become an everyday listener today. Cody, let's discuss the strengths of RJ Harvey. I kind of mentioned everything the Broncos lacked last year at the running back position. This guy has in spades. And what did the Broncos lack last year? Well, Javonte Williams really struggling with vision. Javonte kind of struggling at times with the burst, the speed element. The Broncos didn't really have much of a home run threat at the position. And certainly when it comes to taking advantage of what the blocking is giving you, that was really missing last year. RJ Harvey brings so much to the table that this team desperately needed at running back.
You mentioned the vision there. I'll give you a game, for example. I was watching, obviously, UCF versus Iowa State, and that was a shootout of a game. I think UCF lost that one 38-35. But RJ Harvey had, I think, 25 carries, $196, and 2 touchdowns in that game. And once again, just you mentioned that strength being vision. I also think you combine vision with patience. He understands, and I think he's patient at letting his blockers get out to a guy and anticipating, okay, if this is an offensive tackle, he may try to seal this guy, which gives me a chance to run it to the outside. If he's going to kick the guy out, it allows me to cut back inside. Almost 9 times out of 10, I'm watching RJ Harvey make an explosive cut and get vertical. You know, he's getting away from defenders. And sometimes I think with Javonte last year, one of the issues that we did see, and I don't ever want this to be a show we're trying to just bring down Javonte. We're just pointing out where the issue was and why the Broncos upgraded this position with a guy like RJ Harvey. But Javonte would run back inside 2 defenders, and defenders would catch him. So that's what contributed really to his low yard per carries last season. I think it was one of his second worst, or one of the worst of his career. The last couple of years, definitely it's been a struggle for Javonte to get those yards. But RJ, with not as great of an offensive line, is turning some of those plays where you're watching it from the end zone angle of the all-22, and you're saying to yourself, I don't see where his vision is going to be, because this looks like it's going to get bottled up. And then all of a sudden he makes a jump cut and he gets north-south vertical and he takes it 14 yards, or he takes it 75 yards for a touchdown. That's what I like about RJ, is that he has this home run potential, but he's got the traits that I think will keep you in the NFL for a decent amount of time. If you trust your blocks, which I think is the Broncos, if they're cemented in their belief that they believe that their offensive line is one of the best in the league, and that it was a running back issue, it was a personnel issue, then they think that RJ Harvey is going to explode onto the scene here this upcoming season. That's one thing that stands out to me. I think contact balance is also another thing, Sayre. I mean, there are a couple plays you saw against CU when they played there, but there's times where a defender hits him, wraps up around the legs, and somehow he still keeps his feet turning. That's one thing I like. And he can also play the wildcat a little bit for you as well. There's a lot to like about RJ Harvey and the strengths that he brings to the table here.
Yeah, and that's an interesting note there because he originally committed to Virginia. I know he said in his conference call after he was drafted that he committed to Virginia because they were one of the only schools that said, hey, you can play some quarterback for us. And that shifted very quickly because the vision from UCF was always to have him come in and play the running back position. So while he was, I think, a little disappointed things didn't work out at quarterback, I think he knew also that he could get into a situation where the NFL could be in his future as a running back. And George Paton had such a fascinating comment about him after they picked him, Cody. He said Harvey was kind of our pet cat throughout the process. He said this is what the Broncos like about him. Okay, so running style, he's dynamic, really good vision, really good instincts, good contact balance, highly explosive. George said that they thought he had maybe the best vision in the draft, and he said the thing that he led everyone with on their board was plus 10 runs. So I think that means that 10 or more yards. And we've talked about how he's been the best over the last 2 years at 15 plus yard runs, but the Broncos are even looking at, hey, 10 plus yard runs, you throw him in that bucket as well. So with a guy like this, I think it's fascinating that the Broncos keep on saying that he wasn't featured as in the passing game at UCF. And I think that's an important distinction there, because it's not to say that he doesn't have good hands, or it's not to say that he can't be featured in the passing game, but I think they see the vision there, which we can kind of blend into strengths and weaknesses a little bit. I just feel like that's maybe the number one indicator right there, the explosiveness on these running plays and just being able to hit that hole hard with the 38-inch vertical, the 4.4 speed and the 40-yard dash. This guy he's low cut and he's explosive, and he's somebody that can give you that pop when you desperately need it. All of a sudden you see this guy disappear at the line of scrimmage, and then he's 15 yards downfield because nobody can find him. I think that his size almost can be an advantage too, Cody.
Well, I think also UCF's quarterback play was so up and down. I mean, they went through a couple of guys. I'm not sure if that was due to injury, but I just know in all the games I was watching, I was seeing one guy number 10, then I'd see someone who's number 11, then I'd see a guy who's number 12, and I'm thinking to myself, why are they going through all these different quarterbacks? Could have been injuries, bad play, whatever it may be. But overall, quarterback play was very inconsistent. They would do a lot of read option stuff with RJ Harvey when they had, I think, a more mobile-prone quarterback who could get to the outside. But there was one game, too, it was against CU, where their quarterback fakes a QB draw. RJ Harvey runs out on a wheel route, pops it over wide open. And look, the only guy that came close to catching him was Travis Hunter, who went second overall to obviously the Jacksonville Jaguars. But I mean, you see the speed on display. If the Broncos can get, and look, we saw Marvin Mims utilized as that back in the backfield that would run the wheel route. Factor in, like, what if you have Marvin and RJ Harvey in the backfield? And now it's saying, hey, we know we're getting a cover zero look here. These linebackers, they're going to have to cover these guys. That's an isolated matchup issue where Sean Payton can take advantage. That's one thing that stands out. I think there's a lot still to develop in the passing game because of those things that you mentioned, is that he really was their offense as a rusher. And, he contributed out of the backfield. I believe he averaged around 13.5 yards per catch in 2024 at UCF. But the issue being that you had up and down quarterback play, teams would sell out to stop RJ Harvey, and they still couldn't do it. That, to me, is what stands out about him. But Broncos country, what about some of the weaknesses that are being discussed? He had a couple of fumbles at UCF. Is this an issue that carries forward into the NFL? We'll debate and discuss that here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Strengths, weaknesses, all of that are being discussed here about the Broncos' second-round draft pick, RJ Harvey out of UCF, a guy who is an absolute piss missile out of the backfield as a pass catcher or even as a runner. He's a north-south phenom, and that's one thing that stands out. But are some of the issues or weaknesses here related to pass protection or even sometimes ball security? We'll discuss all that here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Sayre, I know as we continue to highlight RJ Harvey here, we look at every player the Broncos draft, their strengths, their weaknesses, the ideal fit and projection on the depth chart. There's so many different things that you can go with, right? I think a lot of people, when he was initially drafted, You saw a lot of people tweeting, why are the Broncos taking a guy who's 5'9"? That's not an issue at all for the Broncos. I think when you watch him play as well, 5'9" is not an issue, especially when he's 205 pounds. Now, if he was 5'9" and let's say 185, probably wouldn't be sustainable to have him, or it would, I think, be a little bit more of a questionable pick. 5'9", 205 is not questionable to me, but your thoughts on the size weakness that people are talking about?
I mean, take a look at a picture of this guy. He doesn't miss leg day. You see this guy. I mean, he's 205 pounds, Cody. I guarantee you the dude can push, more than double that on a squat rack. I think he's obviously got tremendous lower body strength. So I'm not worried about the size, but you talked about the fumbles, and I think maybe hand size potentially coming into play. I don't want to diminish the idea that ball security could be an issue, but I also have to acknowledge that just like with Audric Estime last year, there are times that you are willing to live with some of these things. You don't want a running back to go out there and get the yips. Like I think that happened to Javonte Booker, for those who remember when he came out of Utah, biggest steal the Broncos had in that 2016 draft or whatever, and fumbles in the
scary.
Yeah, and it's just like, okay, the guy's got the yips, and he couldn't recover from it. I mean, right? And Monte Ball, unfortunately, I think had the yips after fumbling the ball. So that's the biggest concern that I have with fumbles is running backs getting the yips out there. And for those who have no idea what I'm talking about with the yips, it's like, okay, you fumbled the ball. Now all of a sudden you're not able to do what you're good at because you're constantly worried about fumbling the ball. You have to still be able to go out there and play the game with better ball security. We saw Melvin Gordon, I think, when he got to the Denver Broncos, Cody, I think he was just like, screw it. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make plays. And ball security, that went back to the wayside for him. And it was a huge problem because he's a veteran back. I think you're willing a little bit more to live with that for younger guys, but also that will reflect on Sean and George because they didn't take any measures to get somebody with better ball security.
I've seen some people say that RJ's got some Melvin Gordon explosiveness to him, which I find to be interesting. And I think it's very valid when you watch him. Let's go through his career, right? Okay, so in 2022, this was the year that he tore his ACL. 3 fumbles, 2 of them lost. 2023, coming off the ACL, he had 3 fumbles. He lost all 3 of those. Last year, he had 3 fumbles, only lost 1 of them, though. So I think, that's obviously one thing they're going to emphasize is, hey, ball security, that's a number one thing. But I always think it's interesting to look at his production in 2022, in 13 games played. Think of it this way, Sayre, 118 total rushing attempts, right? So cut almost in half what he essentially did in 2023, also cut in half what he did really in 2024 because he had 226 overall carries in 2023, 232 in 2024. But look at it this way. His rushing attempts per game, he would have 9 rushing attempts and he'd have around 6.7 yards per carry at that point. That right there is a little nuts. Now that increased to 17, it increased to 19 over the last couple of years. But with his minimal touches, 2022, his rushing output was 796 yards on 118 total carries. Now you go to 1,400 yards on 226. Even in 2022, when it wasn't his best output, that was still pretty impressive numbers he was putting up. He had 5 TDs on the ground. So I think one of the things that people are talking about there in terms of maybe some of his weaknesses, we talked about the pass catching game there. I noticed like there was a game against CU where I felt like he had a concentration drop, it was on 3rd down. He runs a little bit of an angle route, sits in the middle, and he's just looking upfield before he looks the ball in. That's a drop. That to me is not really an issue. That happens to every player. There's no trend of it when you watch his tape of that really being something you need to be worrying about. So for me, I think that's a little bit of a harp that people are kind of throwing on him. But obviously with that size at 5'9", I think probably the biggest thing people are talking about is pass protection going to be an issue. Can he pass pro? In the games that I've seen, he can pass pro. I just think so much of it is, are they leaking him out or are they keeping him to play A gap, B gap, and then protect backside at times? Depends so much on the play call, but he's got the ability to pass pro.
Yeah, and that's going to be essential for him getting more and more. Like what we talking about the first segment, getting the lead on this Denver Broncos offense in total touches. You've got to be able to pass protect out there. I was going to ask you this question too, Cody, because I'm not necessarily an offensive coordinator or anything like that. I mean, I love the game. I never really played beyond high school, but if you're an offensive coordinator trying to kind of, help a guy along in terms of, hey, this guy struggles in pass pro, how can we sort of mitigate that problem? Can the Broncos run more RPOs offensively to sort of, give that in a way a little bit boost forward, or make it so that it's not necessarily that big of a weakness? Like if they're in the shotgun and RJ Harvey's out there, they're not necessarily giving it away that they're going to be throwing the ball in that instance because or that he's running a route, I guess is maybe the better way to put that. So can you utilize RPOs to keep defenses from blitzing you constantly, or is that not necessarily, are those two things mutually exclusive?
No, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think you can certainly run RPOs. I mean, the key every time for the quarterback is when they get out there pre-snap, whether you're in shotgun, whether you're under center, you're reading a certain guy. And if he does something on the snap, or if he's aligned in, a certain way, like you're recognizing the coverage, let's say it's zone coverage, and you're running an RPO. Ideally, let's say that you're trying to run the number 2 receiver on a slant route, right? And that's going to be your RPO read. If that linebacker is coming forward, then you're pulling and you're throwing the slant there to the number 2 receiver. Whereas, hey, if that linebacker stays, I'm handing it off and we're running outside zone, or we're trying to get to the outside or cutting inside, the C gap, whatever it may be. Those are some things that you can do. But realistically speaking, you can work with a guy who's 5'9" in pass protection, because here's the thing, he's got 205 pounds to him. And I would even guess that he may even put on 2 or 3 pounds going into training camp. I don't know where the Broncos are going to have him specifically. I know Sean is very big on guys being at a certain playing weight at various positions. But the thing is like it's drastically different than Jaleel McLaughlin in pass protection, because Jaleel, as you know, has a leaner frame. He's skinnier than RJ Harvey. So you wonder how that's going to hold up. That was a valid gripe with Philip Lindsay as well when he was a member of the Broncos, is can he pass pro? That wasn't necessarily always the case. So you have a guy who's bulkier, stockier, who can get low mass. We always say in football, the lower man wins. RJ Harvey, I don't think pass protection is going to be an issue for him, but I think it's going to have to be something he works on, as does every single other running back that's on this roster.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's going to be worth monitoring for. I just don't know who else provides that, right? I mean, he's going to have to learn it, because it's not like, I know Jaleel improved in that last year, but it's not like Jaleel McLaughlin or Tyler Bidet or Blake Watson are all, hey, this is the Hall of Fame pass protection film that you want to watch. It can be learned. So if those guys can do it, then RJ Harvey can do it. And it's just a matter of being in the right place at the right time. Because Javonte Williams, to his credit, that was probably what he became best at. And we knew that he was good at that coming out of North Carolina as well. A former linebacker. He likes cracking face masks, and he likes busting people up in pass pro. And it's going to serve him well in the NFL. And I think that will serve any of these backs well. But I'm fascinated to see, Cody, how all of these potential weaknesses can be flipped on their head. You look at RJ Harvey, there's a lot of talk about vision, contact balance, his ability to create something out of nothing. While it's a great strength of his, I think that a lot of times too, you get a little bit of the Le'Veon Bell sort of syndrome when you're in between the tackles, kind of what people would say dancing around a little bit, and you see him out there kind of trying to create, but also not necessarily always bursting with that explosiveness that we see. He's kind of waiting for things to develop. I think that can be both a strength and a weakness at times at the NFL. If you're always looking to dance around and do those sorts of things, it's one thing, but if you're selective with it, that can be a huge area of strength for him.
Yeah, and I'll say maybe the one benefit is, not playing on a great offensive line, at UCF, is that a lot of times when he was supposed to go inside, it never materialized because defenses would kind of plug the A gap, and then he was forced to bounce it outside. At the NFL level, we know you're going to face more disciplined defenses. I mean, it's such a jump. Every year we have these conversations. You see it on social media about, the worst NFL team and the best college team. And could the best college team beat the worst NFL team? No, the NFL, there's a reason it is one of the hardest professions in all of football. I mean, because there's just a different level of discipline. There's a different level of just, I would say, defensive prowess, where even if you have a bad defense, that bad defense can be studs one game. Like, who was the team that the Broncos faced this year that had the worst rushing defense in the NFL? Was it the Indianapolis Colts, if I'm not mistaken?
It could have been the Colts. Yeah, that sounds right.
And they couldn't run the ball against them. Denver couldn't. Mm-hmm. Denver couldn't get it going. And I remember even like 2 years ago, 2023, the Minnesota Vikings had one of the worst rushing offenses. in all of football, yet they were exploding against the Broncos, who had one of the best run defenses at that time going into that Sunday Night Football matchup. So really, it's like the NFL is just a different animal. You have better players, and you're facing NFL caliber players. Whereas on college, like, and here's the thing for RJ Harvey, he wasn't always facing NFL caliber players, but people want to use that as a negative, where I'll also say if he struggled against some of those teams, then the critique would even be worse. So it's a lose-lose situation. For me, I think you have to have balance with patience inside the hole. I know the idea that Sean Payton wants is to get north-south quickly. And I think that's the number one thing that I see on tape that RJ Harvey does consistently, is even if he bounces it out on one play, he doesn't bounce it out and ride it all the way to the sideline. He'll bounce it out just to create some space because he's got good speed. He'll plant his foot in the turf, and then he'll step and get north very, very quickly to get positive yards. And I think that's an element the Broncos simply didn't have last year. I think Audric Estime is a great kind of, I think, piece to kind of play off of here for RJ. So I'm excited to see these two guys work. We'll see who that third running back is going to be this season. But overall, not a lot of weaknesses, with a player like Harvey that you're like, this is concerning. There's not a lot that stands out on tape. So I think that's a good sign here for the Denver Broncos. But Broncos Country, with that said, that'll wrap up our profile series here on RJ Harvey, the Broncos' second-round pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. Monday's episode, we're going to continue that trend. We're going to dive deep into Pat Bryant, one of the more controversial pickups, according to Broncos Country, in the NFL Draft. But if you turn on the tape, you're going to see some exciting things. That's got me amped. That's got Sayre Bedinger amped as to why he can have an impact right away inside the Broncos wide receiver rotation. We'll get to that much more on Monday's episode. Lockdown Broncos. We'll see you then.